How does a man respond when his stepdaughter tells him, in front of his wife, that the best wedding gift is for him to disappear forever, and his wife agrees? After years of lifting them from poverty, I calmly vanished, sold everything, and left behind a surprise that forced them to remember who they once were. Can a man be underestimated until the day they find themselves right back where they started? My name is Elliott Harper, and at 52, I thought I understood the meaning of family. I was wrong. The morning it all began to unravel started like any other in our sprawling colonial home on Maple Ridge Drive. The marble countertops gleamed under the kitchen's pendant lights, and the French doors opened to a view of our manicured garden. Monica, my wife of 8 years, sat at the breakfast bar scrolling through wedding venue photos on her tablet, while her daughter Hailey flipped through bridal magazines with the intensity of a general planning a military campaign. "Elliott, could you move?" Hailey said without looking up as I reached for my coffee mug. "We need this entire counter space for the seating charts." I stepped aside, watching as she spread papers across the granite surface I'd chosen when we renovated the kitchen 3 years ago. The same kitchen where Monica used to cook my favorite meals when we first moved in together, back when gratitude still lived in her voice. "The country club wants the final head count by Thursday," Monica said, her tone carrying the casual authority of someone accustomed to having her demands met. "And the florist needs another $2,000 for the upgraded centerpieces." 2,000. I calculated quickly. That brought the total wedding budget to just over $47,000 for a single day. I remembered when Monica used to clip coupons and Hailey wore second-hand clothes to school. "Maybe we could," I began. "Could what?" Hailey's eyes flicked up from her magazine, irritation flashing across her face. "Cut corners? This is my wedding, Elliott. My one special day." The way she said my name, like it tasted bitter, sent a familiar ache through my chest. When I'd first met Monica and Hailey 8 years ago, 15-year-old Hailey had called me Mr. Harper with shy politeness. Now, at 23, she wielded my first name like a weapon, a reminder that I would never be dad to her. Monica reached over and squeezed Hailey's hand. "Sweetheart, don't stress. Elliott understands how important this is." She looked at me with the expectant smile I'd grown to recognize, the one that meant another check was needed. I nodded and retreated to my home office, a sanctuary lined with the business books and awards that represented 30 years of building my consulting firm from nothing. Through the window, I could see the pool where Hailey used to practice diving when she was in high school, back when she still said thank you for the lessons I paid for. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent my entire adult life helping struggling businesses identify their core problems and implement solutions. Yet here I was, unable to solve the dysfunction in my own home. That evening, we met Carter Graham, Hailey's fiancé, at the Riverside Country Club for a wedding planning dinner. The club's main dining room buzzed with the quiet conversations of the wealthy, crystal glasses chiming against china plates. I'd joined this club specifically because Monica had mentioned how impressed she'd been when her friend Lila brought her here for lunch. Carter stood as we approached the table, his handshake firm and his smile practiced. At 24, he possessed the easy confidence of someone who'd never known real struggle. His family owned a successful agricultural business, and he carried himself with the assumption that success was his birthright. "Elliott," he said, settling back into his chair, "Hailey tells me you're handling the vendor payments. That's generous of you." "It's what family does," I replied, taking my seat across from him. Hailey laughed, a sound sharp enough to cut glass. "Well, it's not like you have much else to contribute. Your only job is to pay the bills and stay out of the way." Monica giggled. Actually giggled, like her daughter had made a clever joke instead of delivering a calculated insult. Around us, other diners glanced over with expressions ranging from amusement to pity. Carter leaned back in his chair, swirling his wine. "You know, Elliott, I have to admire older men who know their place in the family hierarchy. Some guys your age try to cling too hard, you know? Try to be relevant when they should just accept their role. The waiter approached our table, and I ordered the salmon, my appetite gone, but my manners intact. I'd learned long ago that responding to their provocations only gave them more ammunition. The wedding planner wants to schedule another meeting, Monica said, cutting into her filet. Tuesday at 2. Don't worry about coming, Elliott. It's mostly details about flowers and music, things you wouldn't understand anyway. I nodded, sipping my water and watching the three of them discuss my money as if I weren't sitting right there. The club's staff, people I'd known for years, shot me sympathetic glances when they thought no one was looking. As we prepared to leave, Hailey raised her wine glass in a mock toast. You know what, Elliott? I've been thinking about wedding gifts, and I figured out what would make me happiest. Monica's eyes sparkled with anticipation. Carter leaned forward, grinning. The greatest gift you could give me for my wedding, Hailey continued, her voice carrying clearly across the dining room, would be if you just disappeared from our family forever. The words hung in the air like smoke from a fire. Around us, conversations quieted as other diners absorbed what they'd just heard. I looked at Monica, waiting for her to say something, anything, to defend me or soften the blow. Instead, she nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. You know, Monica said, Hailey might be onto something. It would certainly make things simpler. Carter raised his glass. To simple solutions. They clinked glasses while I sat there, the sound echoing in my ears like a grim toll. In that moment, surrounded by the luxury I'd provided and the family I'd tried to build, I understood something fundamental. I wasn't their family. I was their bank account with legs. I excused myself to the restroom, where I stared at my reflection in the mirror. The man looking back at me had gray at his temples and lines around his eyes, but his expression was calm, methodical. I'd built a successful business by knowing when to cut losses and when to implement decisive action. Walking back to the table, I made a decision that would change everything. The next morning, I sat in my office reviewing a file I kept in my desk's bottom drawer, a collection of photos and documents from the day I'd first met Monica and Hailey. The images told a story they seemed determined to forget. 8 years ago, I'd been called to consult for a small nonprofit organization struggling with financial management. Monica worked there as a part-time administrative assistant, and during one of my visits, she'd mentioned having trouble with her car. Being the kind of man who couldn't ignore someone in need, I'd offered to take a look. Following her directions to her address, I'd pulled up in front of a tiny, single-story house that seemed to lean on itself for support. The roof sagged in the middle, several windows were covered with plastic sheeting, and the front steps consisted of cinder blocks stacked precariously. Monica had answered the door wearing a coat inside her own home. Behind her, 15-year-old Hailey sat at a card table doing homework, her breath visible in the cold air. The heating system stopped working last month, Monica had explained, embarrassed. We're saving up to fix it, but... I'd stepped inside and immediately understood their situation. The house was clean, but desperately poor. Hailey slept on a mattress in the living room because the single bedroom's ceiling leaked. The kitchen consisted of a hot plate and a mini refrigerator. In the corner, a space heater provided the only warmth. Mom works 2 jobs, Hailey had said, looking up from her homework, but it's still not enough. That night, I'd gone home to my empty 4-bedroom house and made a decision. Within a month, I'd hired a contractor to fix their heating system. Within 3 months, I was taking Monica to dinner. Within 6 months, I'd asked them both to move in with me. I remembered the day they'd first seen my house. Monica had stood in the foyer, tears streaming down her face as she took in the hardwood floors, the crystal chandelier, the curved staircase leading to the second floor. It's like a palace, Hailey had whispered, running her hand along the marble-topped hall table. It's our home now, I'd told them both. All of it. The first year had been everything I'd hoped for. Monica cooked elaborate meals in the gourmet kitchen, and we'd eat together at the dining room table, sharing stories about our days. Hailey had transformed from a shy teenager into a confident young woman, joining the school's diving team and drama club, activities I was proud to fund. Monica had quit her second job and enrolled in night classes to finish her degree. Hailey had her own bedroom, bathroom, and study space. For the first time in years, they'd had stability, security, and hope for the future. But somewhere along the way, gratitude had curdled into entitlement. I flipped through more recent photos, Hailey's high school graduation, where she'd barely acknowledged me in her speech, despite my paying for her college prep classes. Monica's college graduation, where she'd thanked everyone who supported her journey without mentioning my name. Hailey's college graduation, where she'd rolled her eyes when I'd tried to take a photo. Now I was watching them prepare for a wedding funded entirely by my money, planned in venues I'd secured through my connections, attended by friends they'd made through my social circle, and they wanted me to disappear. That afternoon, I drove past their old house. It still stood on Elm Street, looking even more dilapidated than I remembered. The current tenants had done nothing to improve it. If anything, it looked worse. The roof had developed new leaks, the front yard was overgrown, and the same cinder block steps threatened to collapse under their own weight. I sat in my car, engine running, and imagined Monica and Hailey living there again. No granite countertops, no walk-in closets, no heated bathroom floors, just the reality of their situation, without me as their safety net. Later that evening, I found them in the living room with Monica's friend, Lila Jennings, a woman whose primary talent seemed to be stirring up trouble while avoiding any consequences. They were surrounded by wedding magazines and fabric samples, the coffee table covered with vendor contracts and budget spreadsheets. "Elliott," Lila called out as I entered, "we were just talking about you." I doubted that conversation had been flattering. "We've decided the rehearsal dinner should be at the club too," Monica announced without looking up from her planning. "It'll be easier than trying to coordinate two venues. Another $5,000 minimum." I calculated the running total in my head while they continued planning my financial destruction. "You know," Lila said, her voice carrying that tone women use when they're about to say something deliberately hurtful, "I was telling Monica she really deserves someone who appreciates her sophistication, someone who understands her worth." Hailey looked up from her magazine. "Elliott understands his worth. That's why he pays for everything and keeps quiet." They all laughed. Actually laughed. At my expense, in my house, while planning a wedding funded by my money. That night, after they'd gone to bed, I sat in my office and opened a folder labeled Contingency Plans, something every good businessman maintains. Inside were documents I'd hoped never to need, asset inventories, account statements, and a copy of the prenuptial agreement Monica had signed 8 years ago. She'd protested the prenup at the time, claiming it showed I didn't trust her. I'd explained that it wasn't about trust. It was about protecting what I'd worked 30 years to build. My lawyer had insisted on it, and Monica had eventually signed, eager to move into the security I provided. Now, reading through those documents, I realized my lawyer had been wiser than I'd known. The prenup was ironclad. The house remained my separate property. The business accounts were protected. Even the improvements I'd made to their old house, the heating system, the roof repairs, the updated electrical, were detailed in a separate agreement that transferred ownership back to Monica if our marriage ended. I'd given them a life they could never have achieved on their own. I'd provided stability, security, and opportunities they'd never dreamed possible. In return, they'd learned to see me as an obstacle to their happiness rather than its foundation. But obstacles could be removed. And sometimes, the best way to help people appreciate what they have is to let them experience what life is like without it. I closed the folder and began making a list. The next few days passed in a haze of wedding preparations that deliberately excluded me. Monica and Hailey left early each morning for appointments I wasn't invited to attend, returning home with shopping bags and excited chatter about decisions made in my absence. Wednesday afternoon, I found myself sitting alone in Grounded Coffee, a small cafe downtown, when Monica and Lila arrived for what was clearly a planned meeting. They chose a table near the window, apparently not noticing me in the corner booth with my laptop. "The florist was asking about final payments," Monica said, stirring sugar into her latte. "And the caterer wants confirmation on the upgraded menu." "How much are we talking?" Lila asked. "Another 8,000, maybe 9. But it's worth it. This wedding is going to be absolutely perfect." Lila leaned forward conspiratorially. "And Elliott's just going along with all this?" Monica shrugged. "What choice does he have? He knows what side his bread is buttered on. Besides, after the wedding, things might be different anyway." "Different how?" "Well, Hailey won't be living at home anymore. And I've been thinking, maybe it's time for some other changes too." My coffee had gone cold, but I continued typing on my laptop, appearing absorbed in work while listening to my wife discuss my future as if I were a piece of furniture she was considering replacing. "You mean divorce?" Lila's voice dropped to a whisper. "I mean options. Elliott served his purpose, but Hailey's right. He's not really family. He's just there, taking up space." They spent another 20 minutes discussing my shortcomings and their plans for after the wedding. Apparently, my usefulness had an expiration date, and it was rapidly approaching. That evening, I attempted to participate in the wedding planning one more time. Monica and Hailey were reviewing seating charts in the dining room when I approached with a suggestion about accommodating my business partner and his wife. "Elliott," Hailey said without looking up, "we've got this handled. You don't need to worry about the details." "But Derek and his wife are not part of the wedding party," Monica interrupted. "We'll find somewhere to put them." I tried again. "The budget might be getting a bit—" "The budget is fine," Hailey snapped. "God, you're so obsessed with money. Can't you just let me have my day without constantly reminding everyone that you're paying for it?" The irony was staggering. She was angry at me for mentioning money while spending mine at a rate that would have impressed a small government. Later that evening, my phone buzzed with a text from Hailey. "Don't come to tomorrow's meeting with the wedding planner. We want to focus on creative decisions without having to explain everything." I stared at the message for a long moment. They were planning a wedding, funded entirely by my money, in a venue secured through my membership, with vendors I was paying, and I wasn't welcome at the planning meetings. Friday evening, Carter's family invited us to dinner at their farmhouse outside town. The Graham family had owned their land for 3 generations, and their home reflected old money values, conservative, traditional, and slightly suspicious of newcomers. Carter's father, William Graham, was a man who believed respect was earned through generations of proper behavior. His wife, Patricia, possessed the kind of refined coldness that came from never having worried about money. "Elliott," William said as we shook hands, "Carter tells us you're in consulting." "Business consulting, yes. I help companies improve their operational efficiency." Patricia smiled thinly. "How practical. And you've been married to Monica for how long?" 8 years. "Ah, a second marriage then." Her tone suggested this was somehow scandalous. During dinner, the conversation centered around family traditions and the importance of knowing one's place in family structures. Carter regaled everyone with stories about his college fraternity, while Hailey hung on his every word. Monica nodded along enthusiastically, clearly desperate to fit in with people she saw as her social superiors. "The thing about family," William said, cutting into his steak, "is that it's not just about who you marry. It's about who belongs and who doesn't." Patricia nodded sagely. "Some people try too hard to insert themselves where they don't naturally fit." I realized they were talking about me. In my own presence, they were discussing my inadequacy as a family member. Monica said nothing in my defense. Hailey actually nodded in agreement. Elliott understands his role, Carter said with a grin. He's the provider, the foundation. Right, Elliott? Something like that, I replied. After dinner, while the women looked at Patricia's china collection, Carter pulled me aside on the back porch. Look, Elliott, I want you to know I appreciate what you're doing for Hailey. The wedding, the house, all of it. But after we're married, things are going to change. Hailey and I have our own plans, and we don't want any interference. What kind of interference? The kind where you think paying for things gives you a voice in decisions. Hailey's going to be my wife, and I'm going to be the man in her life. I hope we understand each other. I understood perfectly. They wanted my money but not my presence, my support but not my opinions, my resources but not my respect. That night, driving home in silence, I made my decision. Monica stared out the passenger window, probably planning how to redecorate the house once Carter and Hailey were married. Hailey sat in the back seat, texting someone and occasionally laughing at responses. They'd made their position clear. I was not family. I was a service provider whose usefulness was temporary and whose continued presence was unwanted. Fine, I could work with that. In my office that night, I opened the contingency folder again and began making phone calls. My lawyer answered on the second ring, despite the late hour. Derek, I said, I need to discuss some asset protection strategies. How soon can we meet? Monday morning, I sat across from Derek Whitman in his law office, watching him review the prenuptial agreement with the thoroughness that had made him my trusted advisor for 15 years. This is solid work, Derek said, adjusting his glasses. Your house, your business, your investment accounts, all protected. The only joint asset is the checking account you use for household expenses. What about the improvements I made to Monica's old house? Derek flipped through the documents. Interesting. You retained ownership of all improvements made to the property. If the marriage ends, you can either remove the improvements or transfer them to her as part of a settlement. And the wedding expenses? Those are gifts, technically, but… Derek paused, studying a clause near the end of the agreement. There's a provision here about financial fraud or misrepresentation. If Monica entered the marriage under false pretenses or with intent to exploit your resources, you could potentially recover those gifts. I thought about the conversations I'd overheard, the casual dismissal of my role in their lives, the assumption that I would continue funding their lifestyle indefinitely, regardless of how they treated me. I want to protect myself, I said. Completely. Derek nodded. I'll need a few days to prepare the paperwork. In the meantime, I'd suggest documenting everything, expenses, conversations, any evidence of their intentions. Tuesday, I visited my bank and opened a new account in my name only. The wedding expenses had been flowing from our joint checking account, which Monica had access to. That was about to change. I need to transfer the funds and close the joint account, I told my banker, Patricia Knowles. Of course, Mr. Harper. Will Mrs. Harper be co-signing the closure? She doesn't need to. Check the account agreement. I have unilateral authority. Patricia reviewed the documents and nodded. You're correct. When would you like this to take effect? Immediately. Wednesday, I called the wedding vendors. The conversation with the florist was typical of the others. Mr. Harper, we were expecting the final payment for the upgraded arrangements. I'm calling to cancel the order. Cancel? But the wedding is in 3 weeks. I understand. Please send me documentation of any cancellation fees. Sir, your daughter will be devastated. Stepdaughter, I corrected, and she'll survive. I made similar calls to the caterer, the photographer, the band, and the venue coordinator. Each conversation followed the same pattern: shock, protests about the short notice, and eventual acceptance when I made it clear my decision was final. The country club was the most difficult call. Elliott, said Margaret Foster, the event coordinator, surely this is just a misunderstanding. The Harper-Graham wedding is going to be beautiful. I'm sure it would have been, Margaret, but I'm no longer funding it. What happened? Did you and Monica have a fight? Monica and Hailey made it clear that my presence in their family is unwanted. I'm simply giving them what they asked for. Thursday, I met with a real estate agent recommended by Derek. Sandra Reeves specialized in high-end properties and understood the need for discretion. The house should sell quickly, Sandra said, walking through the rooms with her appraiser. The location is perfect, and you've maintained it beautifully. I'd estimate we could have offers within a week. I need this done quietly. No signs in the yard until after the closing. Of course. We'll market it through our private network first. While Sandra worked, I began the process of separating my belongings from the shared items Monica and Hailey had accumulated. 8 years of marriage had created a complex web of ownership, but I was methodical in my approach. My books, my artwork, my personal furniture, everything I'd brought to the marriage or purchased independently went into one category. Everything else stayed. Friday, the moving company arrived for an estimate. I met them at the door, explaining that this was a partial move requiring discretion. We need everything packed and moved while the other residents are out, I told the foreman. Probably next week during the day. No problem, sir. We do a lot of these kinds of moves. Divorce? Something like that. That evening, Monica and Hailey returned from another day of wedding planning, their arms full of shopping bags and their voices bright with excitement. The dress fitting went perfectly, Hailey announced, dropping her bags in the foyer. And we found the most amazing shoes. Monica held up a small box. Look at these earrings. They're perfect for the wedding. I nodded from my position at the kitchen counter, where I was reviewing the cancellation confirmations from the vendors. Neither of them asked what I was reading or how my day had gone. Elliott, Monica said, opening the refrigerator, we need to transfer another $5,000 to the wedding account. The band wants their final payment. The account is closed, I said quietly. Monica froze, a bottle of wine halfway out of the refrigerator. What do you mean closed? I closed the account. There will be no more transfers. Hailey looked up from her phone. Very funny, Elliott. We have vendors to pay. Then you'll need to find another way to pay them. Monica set the wine bottle on the counter with more force than necessary. Elliott, this isn't the time for games. The wedding is in 2 weeks. I'm not playing games. I'm simply following your daughter's advice. What advice? Hailey's voice had risen to a pitch that probably bothered the neighbors. You said the greatest gift I could give you would be to disappear from your family forever. I'm granting your wish. For a moment, the kitchen was silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator. Then both women began talking at once, their voices overlapping in a symphony of outrage and disbelief. You can't be serious. This is insane. The vendors are expecting... People will think... I let them vent for a few minutes, then raised my hand for silence. I've made my decision, I said. You've made it clear that I'm not wanted here, so I'm leaving. Fine, Hailey said, her face flushed with anger. Leave, but you're still paying for my wedding. No, I said, I'm not. Monica stepped closer, her expression shifting from anger to something approaching panic. Elliott, we can talk about this. If you're upset about something Hailey said, it's not just what she said, it's what you didn't say, what you never say. When your daughter tells me to disappear forever and you nod in agreement, that tells me everything I need to know about my place in this family. I walked toward the stairs, then paused and turned back. You'll want to start making alternative arrangements for everything. Saturday morning, I left early and spent the day at my office finalizing the details of my exit strategy. When I returned that evening, the house was dark except for a light in Hailey's room. I could hear her on the phone, probably with Carter, her voice alternating between tears and rage. Monica was in our bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed with her laptop open and papers spread around her. I've been calling vendors all day, she said without looking up. Do you have any idea how much money we'll lose in cancellation fees? I'm sure it's substantial. Elliott, this is crazy. Whatever's wrong, we can fix it. But you can't destroy Hailey's wedding because you're having some kind of midlife crisis. I sat in the chair by the window, the same chair where I used to read while Monica got ready for bed during the early years of our marriage. This isn't a midlife crisis, Monica. This is a man finally understanding his value to his family. You're valuable to us. You know that. Am I? When was the last time either of you said thank you for something I provided? When was the last time I was included in a decision about my own money? When was the last time you defended me when someone insulted me? Monica was quiet for a long moment. We appreciate what you do. No, you don't. You expect what I do. There's a difference. Sunday, I packed a suitcase with enough clothes for a week and loaded it into my car. Monica and Hailey were at the country club, probably trying to salvage what they could of the wedding plans. Before leaving, I placed an envelope on the kitchen counter. Inside were the keys to my car, the house, and one other set of keys they wouldn't recognize until later. I drove to the extended stay hotel where I'd booked a room for the week, the same hotel where I'd stayed when I first moved to town 30 years ago. It felt appropriate somehow to return to where I'd started. That evening, my phone rang constantly. Monica, Hailey, Carter, even Lila, all calling to demand explanations, make threats, or attempt negotiations. I let every call go to voicemail. Finally, around midnight, I turned off the phone and went to sleep for the first time in years without worrying about someone else's problems. Monday morning brought a call from Derek confirming that all the paperwork was in order. The house sale would close Friday, with the buyers taking immediate possession. The moving company would arrive Wednesday to pack my belongings and place them in storage until I found a permanent residence. What about Monica and Hailey? Derek asked. Do they know about the sale? They'll find out soon enough. Tuesday, I drove past the country club and saw Monica's car in the parking lot. Through the large windows, I could see her at a table with the wedding planner and several other women, their body language suggesting intense negotiation, probably trying to salvage the wedding with a drastically reduced budget. I felt no satisfaction in their struggle, but no guilt either. They'd made their choice when they decided I was expendable. Now they could live with the consequences. Wednesday morning, I met the moving crew at the house. Monica and Hailey had left early, probably to avoid another confrontation, so we worked in peaceful efficiency. My office furniture, my books, my artwork, my clothes, even the tools from the garage. Everything that was mine disappeared into boxes and trucks. The foreman handed me an inventory list. Where do you want us to deliver Mrs. Harper's belongings? I gave him an address on Elm Street. Everything else goes there. That's quite a change in neighborhood, he observed. Yes, it is. By evening, the house felt hollow. My presence had been erased as thoroughly as if I'd never lived there. The empty spaces where my furniture had stood seemed to echo with the ghost of better times. I left one final item on the kitchen counter, a small box containing documents and keys, with a note attached. Your real inheritance. Use it wisely. Thursday, I signed the closing papers for the house sale. The buyers, a young couple with 2 small children, were thrilled to own such a beautiful home. I remembered that feeling, the joy of providing security and comfort for the people you love. The previous owners must have taken great care of this place, the wife said, running her hand along the granite countertop. Yes, I said. They did. Friday morning, I received a text from Monica. Elliott, we need to talk. Come home. I replied, I don't have a home anymore. Check the kitchen counter. An hour later, my phone exploded with calls and messages. I ignored them all. Friday afternoon, I drove to my new apartment, a modest 2-bedroom place across town that felt spacious after the hotel room. My furniture would arrive Monday, but for now, I was content with the bare essentials. Saturday evening, I allowed myself one moment of curiosity and drove past my old house. Monica's car was in the driveway, along with Carter's truck and two vehicles I didn't recognize. Through the windows, I could see people moving around, their gestures animated and urgent. The sold sign was now prominently displayed in the front yard. Sunday, I turned my phone back on and listened to the voicemails. Monica's messages progressed from angry to desperate to pleading. Hailey's were pure rage, accusing me of ruining her life and promising legal action. Carter's single message was a string of profanity that would have impressed a sailor, but it was the final message that interested me most. It was from Alvin Carter, Monica's brother, a man who'd always been skeptical of my relationship with his sister. "Elliott," his gravelly voice said, "I don't know what happened between you and Monica, but Jesus, I just saw where they're living now. Call me." I deleted all the messages and turned the phone off again. Monday morning, I started my new routine. Coffee at a different cafe, work at my office, lunch at places Monica and Hailey would never think to look. For the first time in years, my time was my own. That afternoon, Derek called with an update. "The house closed successfully. The funds are in your account. And Elliott?" Monica's lawyer called. "They want to discuss a settlement." "What kind of settlement?" "They're claiming you abandoned the marriage and left them destitute. They want spousal support and compensation for the wedding expenses." I laughed. Actually laughed. For the first time in weeks. "Based on what grounds?" That's what I asked. "Apparently they believe 8 years of marriage entitles Monica to half your assets, prenup or not." "And what did you tell them?" "That they should read the prenup more carefully, specifically the clause about financial fraud and misrepresentation." Tuesday, I drove past Elm Street. Monica's car was parked in front of the small house, and I could see lights on inside. The sight should have made me feel something: guilt, sadness, regret. Instead, I felt only a sense of completion. They were back where they'd started, and I was finally free. Wednesday afternoon, I was reviewing quarterly reports in my office when Derek called with news. "They found the box," he said. "And?" Monica's lawyer called in a panic. Apparently they want to discuss reconciliation. Too late for that. "Elliott, you should know, they're claiming you trapped them. That you deliberately manipulated the situation to leave them homeless." "Homeless? They have a house. I made sure of that." "Yes, but..." "Derek, I gave them exactly what they had when I met them, plus 8 years of improvements I paid for. They're better off now than they were before they met me." "That's not how they see it. That's not my problem anymore." Thursday morning, I received an unexpected visitor at my office. Alvin Carter stood in my doorway, his work clothes dusty and his expression grim. "Elliott, we need to talk." I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "About what?" "About my sister and niece living in that shithole on Elm Street while you're playing games." "I'm not playing games, Alvin. I'm simply no longer subsidizing people who don't want me in their lives." Alvin shifted uncomfortably. "Look, I never liked you much. Thought you were trying too hard to buy your way into our family. But seeing them now?" He shook his head. "Monica's been crying for 3 days. Hailey can't even look at the place without breaking down. They lived there for years before they met me. That was different. They were surviving then. Now they're broken." I leaned back in my chair. "What exactly do you want me to do, Alvin?" "Fix this. Whatever they said or did, fix it. They told me the greatest gift I could give them was to disappear forever. I gave them that gift." Alvin was quiet for a long moment. Maybe they didn't mean it. Monica nodded in agreement. She meant it. People say stupid things when they're stressed. "For 8 years?" Alvin stood to leave, then paused at the door. "You know, I was wrong about you. I thought you were weak, letting them walk all over you. Turns out you were just patient." After he left, I sat alone in my office, watching the afternoon sun slant through the windows. For the first time since this all began, I felt something approaching doubt. Not about my decision, that had been correct and necessary, but about the completeness of the lesson I was trying to teach. Friday evening, I drove to Elm Street one final time. The house looked exactly as I remembered. Small, worn, but structurally sound, thanks to the improvements I'd made years ago. The heating system I'd installed would keep them warm. The roof I'd repaired would keep them dry. The electrical work I'd paid for would keep them safe. Monica's car was in the driveway, along with a small moving truck. Through the windows, I could see them unpacking boxes, the same boxes that had once contained their meager possessions when they'd moved into my house 8 years ago. But there were new boxes, too, filled with items they'd accumulated during our marriage. Clothes I'd bought, electronics I'd provided, furniture I'd allowed them to choose. They hadn't lost everything, just the luxury of taking my generosity for granted. As I watched, Hailey emerged from the house carrying a box. Even from a distance, I could see she'd been crying. She set the box down on the front steps and sat beside it, her shoulders shaking with sobs. Monica appeared in the doorway and sat beside her daughter, wrapping her arms around her. For a moment, they looked like the family I'd first met 8 years ago, vulnerable, struggling, but together. I started to drive away, then stopped. There was one more thing I needed to do. Saturday morning, I returned to the house on Elm Street with a manila envelope. Monica answered the door, her eyes red from crying and her hair disheveled. "Elliott," she whispered. "I have something for you," I said, handing her the envelope. Inside were the deeds to both houses, the one they now lived in and the one I'd just sold. Also included were bank statements showing the improvements I'd made to their property over the years, receipts for every repair and upgrade, and a letter from my lawyer explaining their legal ownership of everything. But at the bottom of the envelope was something else. The keys to a modest but reliable car, and the title showing Hailey as the owner. "I don't understand," Monica said, scanning the documents. "The house is yours, free and clear. All the improvements, all the repairs, you own them. The car is Hailey's wedding gift, assuming she still wants to get married." Monica's hands shook as she held the papers. "Why?" "Because despite everything, I'm not cruel. I'm just done being taken for granted." Hailey appeared behind her mother, her face streaked with tears. "Elliott, You what, Hailey? I'm sorry. We're both sorry. We didn't mean—" "Yes, you did. You meant every word. And that's okay. You taught me something important about my own worth." I turned to leave, then paused. "The heating system should last another 10 years. The roof is guaranteed for 15. The electrical work is up to code. You'll be comfortable here." "Elliott, please," Monica called after me. "Can't we try again? Can't we fix this?" I looked back at them standing in the doorway of the small house, surrounded by the remnants of their former life and the reality of their current situation. "You have everything you need," I said, "and you have it without me, just like you wanted." As I drove away, I saw them in my rearview mirror, Monica clutching the envelope, Hailey standing beside her, both of them finally understanding the true cost of the life they'd thrown away. The last thing I saw before turning the corner was Hailey dropping to her knees on the front porch, the weight of realization finally breaking through her entitled facade. Monica knelt beside her daughter, and for the first time in years, they looked like people who understood the value of what they'd lost. I drove toward my new apartment, toward my new life, toward a future where my worth wasn't measured by my willingness to be invisible. Behind me, the small house on Elm Street grew smaller in the distance, carrying with it the echo of a lesson learned too late. They had asked me to disappear, and I had granted their wish. What they found in that empty house, the keys to their past and the reality of their future, was exactly what they deserved, a chance to remember who they were before they forgot to be grateful. The front door of the small house swung open in the wind as I turned the corner, and I never looked back again.